Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you on this lovely Monday evening. I hope you've all enjoyed your week off. Enhancement week, of course. Yeah. I actually kind of forgot that I needed to deliver this speech today. It was only when David told me last night, are you still able to do that speech? And I was like, I think I can do it. And it was quite a hectic night last night because I actually had to hand in 2 essays today, and I've also had a test. So I'm not actually massively prepared for this. That's why I don't have any slides, and I've sort of written off all of my speech in case I kind of forget it all. Anyway, my name's Ed, for those of you who don't know. I study economics and econometrics. I actually did a year in industry before I came to university, and I'm probably going to end up becoming an accountant. But what's worse is that my dad is also an accountant. In fact, it gets even worse than this, because when I start work, I will probably be in an office not 200 metres from my dad's current office. When I go into work in the morning, I will go on the train probably with my dad. And I'll probably catch the train back home with my dad. So you can see my life is going to become somewhat depressing after I leave university. And I'm a bit of a walking cliche. But my dad is also the treasurer for the Fabian Society in the Midlands. For those of you who don't know, the Fabian Society is a think tank. It's a sort of political organisation, and it's the sort of intellectual influence behind the Labour Party. The Fabians came up with things like the minimum wage, the NHS, and they founded the London School of Economics. So all of these things mean that I have an interest in business and government. So my speech today is about what I think government needs to do for business. Because business creates the wealth that pays for our schools. Business earns the income that builds our hospitals. Business generates the wealth that pays our pensions. And we need to think, as voters, about how our politicians will respond to the challenges businesses face. So what is the main challenge we face as a society today? I think it's globalization. In the modern world, China will take your lunch, India will eat your dinner, and Russia will invade your country and cut off your gas. So in this internationally competitive and ever-changing world, what should we do? Number one, we need to invest more in public works and infrastructure. We need to maintain London's dominance in finance, in banking, in law, and as a headquarters for international businesses. We need to make sure that places outside of London benefit from London, so that we have fast, reliable trains like HS2 to places like Birmingham, like Bristol, like Manchester. We need to redistribute wealth so that it goes to places like Wales, like the North East and Scotland. We need to invest more in our communications networks. Surely, in Britain, we should have the best internet connections in Europe. We need to think about infrastructure not just as a public service, but as an investment into our nation. Number two, we desperately need to reform government procurement. For those of you who don't know, government procurement is when the government buys goods and services from the private sector. Like when it buys tanks for the military, hospitals for the NHS, and books for our schools. I wonder, how do you guys think that most of the businesses that come out of Silicon Valley are actually financed? Is it by banks, transferring the savings of normal people and investing into businesses? Is it private equity? Things like angel investors, the dragons from Dragon's Den. You might be surprised by this, but it turns out that most of the investment into Silicon Valley actually comes from quite creative spending on the part of the US military. In fact, most modern high-tech ultimately has the US Department of Defense to thank for at its core. A lot of investment isn't done by banks. It isn't actually done by private equity. It's done by government contracts. Government spending on goods and services now accounts for 20% of economic activity, and it is managed abysmally. When the former head of BP asked the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, what examples are there of government procurement being well managed? The head of the Public Accounts Committee thought about this for quite a while, and she could only come up with one answer: the rebuilding of GCHQ. And she couldn't explain why, because of security reasons, so it makes you doubt whether it was actually even true. I think it's a terrible sign that she could only think of one example where procurement was well managed. I remember going to a talk by EY here, and one of the speakers talked about the work that he had done for the army in cost saving. And it was frankly embarrassing what he was saying, because he said things like, it was really simple stuff, like not buying more boots than you have soldiers, and not having warehouses full of equipment you never use. This kind of wasteful stupidity plagues our public spending. The civil service is poorly equipped to make buying decisions. We have people who have no knowledge of business, no training in buying, and no reason to care, in charge of 20% of our economy. We need to reform the civil service so that it doesn't just know about policy making, but it also knows about the needs of business and how to invest in our nation. Number 3, we need to vote for politicians who understand business. Too many of our MPs are career politicians who have little knowledge of business. We need to pay MPs more. They earn a paltry £67,000 a year. When you compare that to a partner in a Big Four accounting firm, they can expect to earn £500,000 a year. And the average CEO of the FTSE 100 earns £4 million a year. MPs are massively underpaid for the importance and the amount of work that they do. Not only does the low pay of MP ensure that only people from rich backgrounds will try to become politicians and MPs, but that people who do know about business, who have succeeded in business, have no financial incentive to get involved. We need people who have been successful and know about business playing more of a part in running our country. I've given you 3 things I think we should do. But what's more important is that we, as voters, think about how the politicians that we elect will respond to the challenges that businesses face. Our nation's international influence depends on our businesses. Our nation's public services depend on our businesses. Our wealth and standard of living depends on our businesses. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, to tell you that when you do consider who you vote for, do consider their education policies, consider their social policies, consider their foreign policies. But even if you have no involvement in business, do consider this, that business is what generates the wealth that keeps Britain working. Thank you all for listening.
Fortunately, we don't have time for audience feedback as that overran our time limit. So I'm going to say make sure that in future you do time your speeches right.
How
So
long was it, sorry?
we normally prescribe 8 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we're going to have to go straight into Alex's feedback.
Yeah, let's go straight into it. Was that your first speech? Or
Yeah.
Before, yeah. Because that would be Max Atkinson's wet dream, I think. The amount of devices I counted in there, you use triads throughout the entire thing, so you sort of free. Yeah, especially when you're saying our nations depend on
That was no accident, that.
Yeah, I know, that's what I'm thinking, that's deliberately scripted in there, but it was a good use of rhetoric, probably the best that I've seen rhetorically this year, but I'm going to keep going on to that. Yeah, your rhetorical questions are in there. Yeah, just saying we need to think about, yeah, what is the main challenge? After each rhetorical question, there was a pause. Pausing could have been slightly longer, but it was still good pauses. The thing that I didn't like was with the opening, but after the first 2 minutes, I still didn't have any idea what speech was actually about. Yeah, and that, well, I wasn't hoping that you'd get to the point. Yeah, and yeah, you didn't need to open saying, oh, I wasn't prepared, I was busy, because that just detracted it, and immediately that's kind of like dropping the dead weight in the room, saying, oh, I wasn't prepared, I was too busy. It's like, it doesn't add anything at all to the message, instead it might turn people off, if anything, so you can just skip that and go straight into a good opening. I thought your conclusion was excellent when you said, business generates wealth that keeps us working. But then you said thank you, and I'm, this is my own personal thing, I don't like the word thank you at speech. I think if you ended, business generates wealth that keeps Britain working, and so you can step back, and that would be a lot more powerful when we remember that. Thank you, kind of, in a way, I would personally say it's watered down. You could have just said that, those would be the last words that remembered from you. You had great articulation, though. I mean, I felt that your articulation was really good in the speech. And I like the example of the accountant and your humour with that, because well, my dad is also an accountant, his dad's an accountant. My commentary was going to say that if I was an accountant, I would be depressed or something like that. But when you were talking about your dad being an accountant, you were smiling throughout that. I think, oh yeah, and if you didn't like that, maybe your gesture didn't match up with your face. And the last thing in the comments is pacing was two-dimensional, so you moved left, right, left, right. There wasn't any like forward or backwards in there. So you could have used the stage a bit more appropriately. I like the fact that you had three, I know this evaluation is long. Anyway, I like the fact that you did have 3 points. And yeah, it was a good use of 3. I guess that was also deliberate.
That was deliberate.
Yeah, that was deliberate. But you could have been just as persuasive, if not more, by cutting down a bit on those, by each of those 3 points. And you did say at the end, yeah, you had 3 points. You could have repeated them again just to hammer it in one more time. So overall, I think you definitely need to make the speech shorter, as Nick said, and I would make this evaluation shorter. But it was a good speech, and if you were going to be persuasive, it definitely had that tone in there, and you could make it more persuasive. But overall, good, yeah, good work in progress, and you could do it again. It was really great.
Okay. A round of applause.